Thanks for tuning in to Howe's Things, a podcast and radio show from the David A. Howe Public Library, recorded right here in Wellsville, New York. I'm Nick Gunning, and today I'm joined by Malik Acosta. Malik, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.
I want to know how many Bruce Lee movies you've watched since that last episode. Just on a constant repeat. Anything new?
Yeah.
Okay.
I probably redid about all his whole collection.
Okay.
And I actually picked up a new magazine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they had a special edition, and
you can't resist. You can't resist those
of
commemorative
course,
magazines.
Of course. As soon as I seen it, I already knew.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they got you. They saw you coming. Well,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
fun. Hey, did you ever watch Shang-Chi? Last time we were
I
talking,
did.
you hadn't seen it. And
I did.
how did it hold up? What
I
do you
liked
think?
it. I liked it. Yeah.
Okay.
It was pretty good.
What did you think of the fight scenes?
I wasn't overly impressed.
Yeah.
But I thought it was some pretty good fighting.
The scene on the bus always stands out to me.
Yeah,
that's
a good scene.
that's a pretty cool one.
Yeah, that definitely was a good scene. I love like scenes when they fighting in a small space like that.
Yeah.
You know, he was
They-
like really athletic. So-
Yeah, definitely. I thought they made good use of that.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Lots of fun Marvel content in 2021.
Yes.
If nothing else, we got a lot of Marvel.
Yes.
In last year.
Yes. Oh yeah. I've been Marvel overload.
Yep.
Yeah.
I agree. Well, hey, February is Black History Month, so we're going to be talking about John Lewis's graphic novel series, a little bit about March and the new one, Run, that just came out. So we're going to be getting into that a little bit later. But first, let's open up our books and see where our bookmarks are. Malik, what have you been reading? I'm looking at my crystal ball and predicting nonfiction. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly, I just kind of been reading the March series.
Oh, okay.
The 3 books, and then I did dive over into this book by Rick Ross. It's called A Perfect Time to Boss Up. I think
Okay,
it was called.
okay.
Yeah, and it was basically just about adjusting to the pandemic and being entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. It was really informative though. I liked it. Yeah.
Have you found this to be a good time to do that sort of thing?
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm
Okay.
personally, I started my little cleaning business, so
Yeah.
it's been a good time to, kind of innovate and get out there.
Yeah. What a weird, I don't know, just I guess I can't say it enough. What a weird time we've had these last
Right.
couple of years. But
It's kind of a make or break though. I think it's a good time where a lot of people just kind of really had to think about, what am I doing?
right.
So you just got to be innovative and try to find ways to
That's true.
adjust.
Well, and we find that even here at the library, we're constantly being like, well, this doesn't work anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Oh,
people
yeah.
aren't interested in that, or how do we get people to I don't know. It's a big challenge
Yeah.
just across the board.
Yeah, but we adjusted pretty good,
I
That's
think
what
so.
mean. A lot of things
Yeah.
that we wasn't trying before.
That's true.
We try now and they working out. So
Yeah, these subscription boxes. So the library's been doing these subscription boxes where people can sign up at the first of the month and get a kind of a tailor-made box of movies, books, whatever they want, and then it refreshes every month. And this has been our first month of doing it, and we had a lot of sign-ups right away.
Yes, we did.
Which that's something we probably wouldn't have tried.
Right.
If in 2019 thinking. So
Right.
Oh
yeah,
anything we can do to
the book reviews,
the moment.
on Facebook,
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff was received
for
so,
sure.
being really good.
Boy, I've read some good things, some weird things. I've been reading for the longest time this book called Carnival of Snackery, and it's a series of essays by David Sedaris. He's one of my favorites. I discovered him at the first library I worked at like decades ago at this point, and they're just funny. They're insightful. They crack me up. So this is a collection of his diaries from, I think, like 2003 to 2020. So it just covered a broad range of things. And I like those on audiobook. And I've had to get it from Libby 3 times now because like it's super long and I just don't finish it before it runs out. So,
Okay.
But I finished it on my walk-in today. So I'm all good. I loved it. I love David Sedaris. The other book I read is one that I got for Christmas from my friend Sarah Jacoby called Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead.
Whoa.
Yeah. By Olga Tokarczuk. It's a mystery, and it's sort of set in this little Polish village, and it's about this woman who looks over people's vacation homes, and then these murders start popping up.
Oh.
And it's a little... She's very into astrology, and there's a trippiness to the book. It was weird. It was a weird read, but I did like it. It was one that I finished and had to sort of think about and be like, did I like that? Yes, I think so.
So was it
that's
like
where I
a
landed.
mystery where it all ended in a nice climax at the end, or
It did, yeah, yeah. And I wasn't. It did a good job of kind of layering in, like, here are some other people. Maybe it has something to do with this, and it was sort of like every time you felt like you had it figured out, a new bit of information would come, and you'd be like, well, no, that doesn't fit. So it was one that I really did have to kind of think back on and be like, yeah, okay, I see it. But it was unusual. It was an unusual book. I'm currently reading one called A Beautiful Friendship by David Weber. It's sci-fi. I've read some of his stuff before. Honor Harrington is his series. Have you heard of that? It's sci-fi. It's kind of like military sci-fi. It's based on like the old Horatio Hornblower kind of stories, but adapted for space. A friend of mine was way into this series, and when he moved, he was like, I don't want these books anymore. So he gave them all to me. So I've just been like over the years kind of reading through them. Interesting. It's good. And I'm listening to Act Like You Got Some Sense by Jamie Foxx. That's an audiobook. That's like, once I finished David Sedaris, I got this Jamie Foxx book. So good so far.
Okay. Is that the one we have hard copy too?
We do, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was going to read it, but I kind of jumped into the March series. So,
yeah.
But I'm going to definitely
I actually started it earlier in the year and then ran out of time, and so I had to just get it again. So I'm kind of picking it back up.
Okay.
But
is it funny?
It is funny, and I feel like his delivery of the stuff is so funny that I don't know. I'm not sure if it would be as fun just to read it, because like Jamie Foxx actually reads the audiobook. So like,
that's cool then.
Yeah,
that's
pretty cool.
Check that out then.
Yeah. Yep. Are you watching anything good recently?
I have. I've been watching this series called Raised by Wolves.
Oh, on Apple, right?
Yeah, on Apple.
Yeah. Okay.
It was it's sci-fi.
Yeah.
And it's got like this kind of horror twist to it. I didn't expect the horror twist. I thought it was just gonna be like this really
straight
deep
up sci-fi
story.
Yeah.
But it got like this really this thriller and kind of horror thing to it. But I like it. It's interesting. They just started a season 2. So maybe the first 3 episodes of season 2 is out. So I'm gonna definitely keep checking it out. It's pretty good.
We've been trying to watch through Apple's Foundation series based on the Isaac Asimov stuff.
I started that. That's the space one, right?
It is, yeah. It's heavy. I don't know. It's a little confusing. Like
I think that's what kind of threw me off a little bit.
Yeah, my wife and I watched the first episode, and we were kind of like, and then watched the second one. It was a little bit more intrigued at the second one, so we're doing that. And then we just started one called After Party. That's also on Apple. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I heard of it.
That's a pretty good mystery, and it's also pretty funny. So liking both of those things at the moment. I haven't seen any good movies in a while. I haven't been out to the theater in a while. I can't really think of
The Matrix.
Oh, the new one.
The new Matrix.
Oh, okay.
And I loved it.
Yeah, did you?
I'm a hardcore Matrix fan, so I don't think it could have been where I didn't like it, but I really liked it. I thought it was a little just intense that they literally. I don't want to get nothing too much away if somebody didn't see it, but they kind of started the story all over again.
I see.
So that part was a little bit. It's almost like, what was the point of those 3 movies if we started all over? But it was really good.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Yeah, I was kind of skeptical about it. My wife loves the first Matrix movie. Like, just loves it, and I like it quite a bit. But when I first saw it, it was like on a tiny little TV on VHS at my friend's house, which is not the ideal way to watch the Matrix.
I didn't realize it was that old.
Well, it's like 99, 2000?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. It's been a while.
So I watched that, and then I think I actually saw the other sequels in theaters. Okay. So I like it, but I'm not like The Matrix. You know what I mean?
Okay, yeah, I'm hardcore Matrix.
Are you? Okay, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Well, I mean, a lot of the Bruce Lee stuff is in that as well.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, clearly they're pulling from Bruce Lee there.
I'm a sci-fi guy.
Yeah.
Plus a kung fu
checking
guy,
a lot of
so
boxes.
That's all.
For sure.
All in.
For sure. Yeah, I do. I mean, I assume I'll see it eventually. I'd like to. There's a bunch of stuff coming out that I'm looking forward to seeing.
Yeah.
So I miss going to movies. I don't know.
Yeah, I do too. I think it is. I think it's very convenient and interesting. How they doing it now, where you can kind of order the movie on, but it doesn't have that same feel.
No, it really doesn't. Yeah, there's certain things where it's just like, you need
Things are getting a little too convenient. Huh?
You need the full experience. You need the full experience. Well, this episode is dropping on Valentine's Day. Are there any? Do you like rom-coms?
Yeah, definitely.
Any that are like old favorites for you?
What comes to mind?
You didn't know I was going to ask you about rom-coms, did you?
I didn't. I will probably say the last thing that I think I watched, if this would fit in that category, was Think Like a Man.
Oh yeah.
It was like one Mel Gibson one was like Think Like a Woman back in the day, and then they
What Men Want. What Men Want. Isn't that what it's called? The Mel Gibson one was What Women Want.
What Women Want. Yeah. Okay. That's
you're talking. Is that Tracy Morgan and
the new one? Yeah.
What is her name?
Taraji.
There you go. Taraji P. Henson. Yes.
Yeah. That's. I think that's like the last one I watched.
That counts. Was it funny?
Counts. Yeah, it was really funny.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really funny.
Well, I'm looking at for book news here. I thought maybe I'd take a look at this list from Book Riot called New Romance Novels in 2022. So instead of New York Times, I'm going to tell our listeners about some rom-coms and book forums coming up here. Sweet.
Look into the future to see what it proves. It's time for book news.
This list was originally published in Book Riot on February 8th. Michelle Rigaldo is the author there. We'll pop this up on Twitter so you can see the whole list. But first here is Yinka, Where's Your Husband? By Lizzie Damiola Blackburn. In Blackburn's witty and feel-good novel, Yinka is a 30-something British Nigerian woman who has a successful career and great friends, but is constantly fielding only one question from her Nigerian mother and aunts: where is your husband? Next, we have Ramon and Julieta by Alana Quintana Albertson. Albertson puts a modern and fresh take on Romeo and Juliet in this novel about two people who meet and instantly hit it off during a Day of the Dead party. How do you feel about Shakespeare?
Kind of spacey, but I like the storyline. A little tragic, but every time I try and get into one of the plays or the movies, it just... It's hard for me to really get into it.
I can admit that I'm not a big Shakespeare fan. I remember when the Romeo and Juliet, like the Baz Luhrmann with Leonardo DiCaprio and Claire Danes, that came out when I was in high school. We were all like, "Oh, we have to go see Romeo and Juliet."
Right. Yeah, it's so like cliche. So cool. You just hear about it.
It is, yeah.
Like,
I've heard only good things about. I think it's on Apple actually. Speaking of Apple, the Denzel Washington, Frances McDormand, Macbeth, which is out now. And I do kind of want to see that. Just because I like those actors, but I'm not a huge Shakespeare fan. One Night on the Island by Josie Silver. As she approaches her 30th birthday, Cleo Wilde decides to book a solo trip to a small Irish island in hopes of finding the next right step for her career. She's less than thrilled when she learns she has to share her remote one-room cabin with Max Sullivan, who is traveling to Ireland from the States in an attempt to trace his roots. I bet they're going to fall in love. I'm So Not Over You by Kosoko Jackson. When Keon Andrews gets an urgent text from his ex-boyfriend Hudson after months of no communication, he thinks maybe he'll get an apology. Instead, Hudson asks him for a favor: pretend to be his boyfriend while his parents are in town.
Ooh, that hurts.
That hurts. Yeah, you think you're going for a reconciliation, but not so much. Man. Not so much. Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. Alexis comes from a long line of surgeons and loves her job as an emergency room doctor in a major city. But her world gets turned upside down when she visits a small town and falls in love with Daniel, a carpenter who's 10 years younger than her. Have you ever dated someone significantly younger or older than you?
5 years, maybe.
Okay, that's something. Yeah. Different pop culture references.
Surprisingly, it was she was younger than I was.
Okay.
But for some reason, she was just very knowledgeable. So I kind of felt like we was the same age.
Yeah. All right.
So,
Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Though Nora Stevens' life is all about books, she's never considered herself the heroine type. Still, she reluctantly agrees to go to Sunshine Falls, North Carolina for a month at the request of her sister Libby, who dreams of a small-town transformation for Nora. But instead of joining her getaway, Nora finds herself continuously thrown together with Charlie, a bookish editor from the city whom she's never exactly gotten along with. Hey, I bet they're going to fall in love also. You think so?
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
Okay. Husband Material by Alexis Hall. In this highly anticipated romantic sequel to Boyfriend Material, Luke and Oliver are happily together, but spoiler alert for Boyfriend Material. But it feels like everyone around them is getting married. As Luke faces mounting pressure to propose, he and Oliver must navigate 4 weddings and a funeral, contemplating their future along the way. Last one on the list here, You Made a Fool of Death with Your Beauty by Akwaik Amazi. 5 years after the accident that killed the love of her life, Faye is slowly starting to move on. an artist, Faye has opened her own studio, moved into her new apartment with her best friend, and started easing back into the dating scene. As she finds new romance, she struggles to navigate the grief of her past while also learning to embrace her future. Oh, and it looks like this is already being adapted into a movie. So that's coming out. Okay. Anyway, that list again is on Book Riot, and we'll pop it over on Twitter. All right, so let's get into our topic for today, and that is the primarily the new Run series by John Lewis, but we're going to talk a little bit about March as well.
Author Spotlight.
Were these on your radar? Had you read these before we started talking about this?
I actually did read the book 1 of March.
Okay.
We had a whole bunch of copies in the children's section.
We did, yeah.
So I just seen it kind of laying around a lot, and I actually picked up one and started reading it. I'm really not too much into graphic novels.
I wondered about that.
But at the same time, these books, I do have a little interest in them. These books really kind of opened me up to, maybe checking out some more graphics.
Yeah.
It was really good. Yeah.
Well, they're really well done, and I feel like, I don't know. I mean, I think they, just by being graphic novels, they're going to reach a different audience.
Right.
I mean, John Lewis has an autobiography that's out there, and I mean, I don't know that the same people who would sit down and read these would sit down and read a thick tome of an autobiography, Right. So
definitely targeted towards young adults. I think the main focus of these books is kind of to awaken the youth, about these subjects and stuff like that, kind of get them to grab the torch.
For sure, and especially in March. I mean, you see it. We get a very young John Lewis, and of course, progressively aging through the first 3. Right. But you see, I mean, these are just students. These are just like young kids who are.
That's amazing.
Marching into a very divisive and dangerous situation. I mean, they're putting themselves at great risk, even though they themselves aren't being violent. They are opening themselves up to potential violence. You know what I mean?
Brave kids.
Really,
brave.
For sure.
I feel like nowadays kids would be like, I'm too young for this.
Yeah.
I can't carry this. But I think back in the 50s, 60s, 20s.
Yeah.
I think young adults was really more, in tune to grow up quick,
Well, sometimes I think that's just true of youth in general. I mean, the older generations are kind of used to the way things are, and you have newer kids coming up, people like, well, why? Like, why is this way? Like, why are you okay accepting this? And I think because of that, it spurs on to action maybe a little bit more. But I think the books are just really well done.
Yeah, they are.
The third book in the series is probably the most dense of the 3, and it does tend to get a little bit bogged down with so many facts.
Right.
But I think you walk away from reading these books having a much deeper understanding of that time in history.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
I think so much of it is just kind of like, the civil rights in the 60s, and that's maybe the extent of what people know. They know the general time frame. They know Martin Luther King.
Right.
And they know kind of the way it was about racial equality, and that's maybe the extent.
Right.
And so I think something like this that can reach people at a different level, reach people maybe at a younger age, and also just present the information in a much more personal way. I think because you're seeing visual representations of not only the people but the circumstances around them, I think you get a lot more emotion out of these graphic novels.
You do. It's very informative. Like you said, that book 3 is pretty dense.
Yeah.
So it's very informative, but I think it's more engaging because, like you said, you get that visual stimulation. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing I noticed when I was reading the books, just kind of looking at some of the pictures, I really felt more engaged with the story.
Oh, for sure.
So
yeah.
And their drawings was really good too.
They are. They're simplistic, but they're also they're expressive. I mean, you really
see.
I mean, you see the anguish, you see the joy when something good happens. Right. I mean, that really comes through. Really limited color palette. They're just kind of shades of blues and grays for the most part.
I just think it's such a level of just realness to it also. Because sometimes it's kind of subject matter that you would be like, that kind of seems a little, intense. But, it's just really real. It really speaks to what was going on and how people really express themselves back then with everything that was taking place.
Well, it's just amazing, and I think also reading it in the lens of the last couple of years we lived through, you could still draw a lot of unfortunate parallels.
Man,
you know what I mean?
No, that part kind of hurts a little bit, but yeah.
I think I mean when we get into Run a little bit more, there's a lot of parallels that I could feel there. But I think, I mean, the primary focus of the March trilogy is really an end to segregation, right? I mean, institutionalized segregation, I guess I should say. You know, desegregating schools and all that. I mean, that's the primary focus there, and it's hard. I mean, when you're reading it from a modern lens and you're looking at that, it's really hard to understand how that was a thing, you know, how it was just like, no, you get your own schools and you get your own schools and you get your own drinking fountains and you get your own drinking fountains. It's just so dehumanizing and hard to accept just how recently it was, you know, like the 1960s is not that long ago.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's a pretty brutal story. And I think, you know, the book kind of culminates in a success, right? I mean, the original trilogy is sort of like, yes, this big thing finally happened and we got it. And I wouldn't say it's a happy ending, but it's kind of an empowering and maybe an uplifting ending that Definitely. This thing happened. So moving into Run, I appreciate that they're continuing the story,
yes,
you know,
definitely.
Because as much as it would be nice to say, hey, racism ended in the 60s, you know, it obviously didn't. And even though there was that one victory, that's like a series of steps that needed to be taken. And so to see the story continue on and to Run, I thought was really interesting. What was your take on Run?
I think it was really intelligent to start Run as basically as a continuation of March. So it's basically like picking up right after March, what happened after that.
Yeah.
You know, because we kind of get these stories and we get, it was this thing happened and this was the result. And Run is more of a, you know, it's not just black and white. It's kind of like, this is what happens to continue to fight. And I thought it was ironic that, this was something he was John Lewis was working on right before he passed away. But he actually got to finish Run.
Yeah.
So to start that off, I thought that was really amazing.
I appreciated the nuance of Run, like you're saying. It's not just a simple like black and white issue. There's all sorts of these complex feelings and emotions and different approaches.
Right.
And one thing that Kate and I were talking in the last episode about the children's book that won on the Tulsa race riots, and we were talking about like how crazy it is to not have known that history, you know.
Right.
And I feel a little bit like that about even the civil rights movement, you know, just you know, being a little white kid in Michigan learning about the civil rights movement, I really got only broad strokes, you know. It was just sort of like black people fighting for equality and then they won, you know. I mean, that's kind of the story that you're given. You know what I mean?
Believe it or not, you know, being African American myself, that was the story that I was given.
Yeah.
Even having
that's interesting.
It is very interesting. My mother was born in 1959.
Yeah.
And my grandpa was probably born in, you know, the 1920s. But you know, they never really educated me too much on, you know, it was small conversations.
Yeah.
But I never had an extensive like storytelling or of what happened or you know how things was. So you know, all I really learned is what we learned in school. Probably just like you.
Which is very watered down.
Exactly.
And it doesn't really, again, at least in my experience of learning about this, it didn't have a lot of nuance, and it's kind of presented in a way that like all black people at this time felt the same way about the civil rights movements.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's what I appreciated about Run, is that even within the student league that John Lewis is the head of here, even within that, there's this great schism of like how they approach this.
Yes.
What they felt like, what the people involved felt like was the right way, like, you know, the nonviolence approach, but trying to have a little bit more of like an empowering message. Mm-hmm. And so I think to see that presented in this graphic novel was kind of a new thought for me. Right. You know what I mean? Just to really see to see even within the Black community at that time, even people in the same organizations having these vastly different opinions and approaches.
Definitely. It was like all these different little sects.
Yeah.
Almost like, politics today, is Democratic Party, but then inside the party is all these, different kind of, sets.
Yeah.
So it was like that. And that's something you really, you really don't hear unless, you kind of really
you're digging in.
into it. Yeah. But I think this book, Run, really kind of brought a light to that.
Yeah.
I definitely got a lot of that.
Yeah.
When I was reading.
Yeah. I just think there's a big danger in painting people or events with a broad brush. Just kind of saying, this was the general experience, this is how people felt, this is how it was resolved, is kind of, I don't know, it makes it sort of easier to accept and move on rather than like forcing you to really think about all the different things that were going on. And this is, again, obviously very rough topic that we're talking about here, because this brings in a more heavy presence of the Ku Klux Klan. Right. It's getting into politics of things like how Black soldiers were treated and things like Vietnam. Right. It's just pulling things from so many different issues that, like, of course those existed, but I just don't really feel like I've been presented with that thought before.
Right. Right. Definitely.
So that was the thing that kept striking me, like, as I read it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Was there something particular in here that you really responded to or felt like, you could see parallels today? Something in it that kind of, you read it, it hit you and made you kind of take pause?
Honestly, most of it did.
Yeah.
I feel like I try not to engulf myself in the news as, to the point where it's just like you just got all this negativity in your mind. But just from the things that I do pay attention to, a lot of the things that I'm hearing about that's going on in our day and time now, and as far as suppression for voters,
for sure.
And stuff, I think that kind of stuck out a little more than anything, just because knowing the main legislation that they was pushing for then, I think in 65 was the right to vote. Yeah. And so just to hear that, a lot of things is going on today in 2022,
absolutely,
as far as voter suppression, and then everything, that happened with this last presidency. It's just kind of, it's hurtful to even see that we're still just still going through these things in the way that we are going through them. I feel like we should be so much further.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And the voter thing was what really stood out to me, because
definitely
the premise here, and like you're saying, I mean, it's prevalent today, was sort of like, yeah, you can vote. We're not going to make it easy for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? I just think that mindset to discourage voting. And here, I mean, obviously in Run, things are happening that are just straight up illegal. But I think the danger even today is working within the law. You can still make it challenging for people to vote. And we see that all the time, whether it's redistricting or just taking away the ease of doing it. So if you don't have a flexible job, you can't vote. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if you're in a place that has long lines and you've got a 15-minute break or even an hour lunch break or whatever, and you can't get through it, then that's it.
Right.
You know what I mean? But the people who have flexibility or, jobs that allow that, you can. And that, again, based on society and the way things tend to go, laws like that restrict access, restrict mail-in voting, restrict times at polls, restrict polling places, do tend to affect minority cultures more. I mean, that's just a fact. And so it's hard to read something like this that's chronicling something before we were even born, that has so many direct parallels today.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's pretty hard to read this and avoid those comparisons. But again, I feel like the success of this book is pointing out that I mean, there really isn't a clear finish line to this kind of thing. I mean, I think you have people who say like, well, slavery was abolished in 1863. There you go. Lincoln did it. Done. And I think the same temptation is true of like the civil rights movement already happened. Lyndon Johnson passed the civil rights bill. Like we did it, And I think this book just drives home that like, no, and I mean, the goal keeps moving because society keeps changing. You got to keep moving and fighting and pushing towards that sort of thing. So I a really powerful read overall.
Yeah, I was listening to so it's John Lewis and I think Andrew Aiden. I'm not sure if that's the guy that kind of co-wrote it with him.
Yep, that's the co-author.
But he was I was watching an interview by him, and he was.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, he was saying something about, what does Run mean? Like, why did they name it Run?
Yeah.
And he was like, well, basically, the March series is kind of self-explanatory.
Yeah.
It was about the marches and everything.
Right.
And the Run was like, what did you do after the marches? And John Lewis was basically like, you run, you run for office. You have to be a part of politics, and you have to kind of stay involved.
Yeah.
To, like you said, to kind of make sure these things are being enforced, and that you have some kind of representation.
Yeah.
And that's what John Lewis dedicated his whole life to.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I hope they're continuing the series. This is clearly called Run Book 1. So
I think.
I don't know how far, because I know that, in reading about this, John Lewis, they had essentially finished everything before he passed away. Like he saw the illustrations and things were pretty much locked in. But I don't know how far they got, beyond this. So as far as like his input on these stories, losing him is going to impact the telling of these stories, because obviously, he was there, he lived it. But I kept wanting to, like, when different characters, like some of the characters who were running for office in this, or John Lewis's, nemesis is probably a strong word, but the guy who kind of takes charge of the SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, whose name I cannot remember right now. Do you remember?
I don't.
Okay,
but I know who you're referring to. So I guess there was kind of this thing where there was kind of a power struggle there.
Yeah.
John Lewis kind of being like the face of the organization. Yeah. But from my understanding, that guy was more in charge of the finances and everything.
Yeah.
So, it was a lot of, tugging back and forth when it came to, making decisions and stuff like that. So I guess John Lewis really felt a lot of hurt with that relationship,
Yeah, well, because he obviously was kind of the face of this and pushed this so far, and then when they kind of got over that hurdle, it seems like there was a sense of like, well, we need a different kind of leadership now, and whether that's true or not, that would certainly be a hurtful thing. But I found myself like wanting to know what happened, but not wanting to just like look up the history of it, because I didn't want it to spoil book 2.
Right. Definitely. From what we can see, I think he only served for 3. John Lewis only served for 3 years
as the chair of that committee.
Yeah,
I think you're right.
But this is the kind of thing I see a lot with the civil rights movement. Yeah. Just a lot of infighting amongst the leadership. And that I think that stunted a lot of growth also.
Oh, okay, interesting.
It's just something that is not needed. Working together and the camaraderie is always going to be more productive than than fighting amongst each other.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see in this just the ever-changing landscape, and it did sort of feel like once they kind of got over the initial hurdles, the approach had to change and be different, and it's almost like the people involved weren't quite ready for that change, because how could you be? Like, how do you know what comes next? How do you know what you need to do? And, I think we have the lens of history to kind of look back and wish maybe you could go back and be like, oh, try this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just sort of like nudge it in different directions here and there.
Not to mention these they were really young at the time.
For sure. Just doing
so
unprecedented things.
Yeah, so intelligent.
Yeah.
I think John, like the March on Washington, from my understanding, John Lewis was the youngest speaker.
Yeah, that's
there,
true. Yep,
you're right. Just to even with Martin Luther King, is how young he was. Sometimes I think when I was their age, what was my mindset and what was I doing with myself? And it's like, my goodness.
Yeah.
These people were just extraordinary human beings. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a fascinating history, and again, I'm glad that we're getting it in this way, because I think this is
so much fun.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think you said early on that it has a lot of appeal to young readers, and I think that's so true, and I think that's so important, because the people who really need to know about this are the people who are going to like kind of lead us into the future.
Right.
You know what I mean? So to have young readers reading this, when they're in high school or younger, it doesn't matter when you read it, but I mean, having people reading it that early, I think just it kind of, maybe they'll see the trends that we're seeing now, maybe reading this will kind of open their eyes to like the things we're seeing are not new problems. So we need new solutions. You know what I mean?
Yes, so definitely. And I feel like even with these graphic novels, I feel like it is really, intense subject matter. But at the same time, I feel like these are books that, my son is 3 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like when he turned 5 and he's in first grade or whatever, I feel like I could read these books to him to kind of educate him and just kind of start him off early to understand, what's going on. And I think these books really do open up, that possibility for parents to kind of introduce kids to this kind of stuff.
No, I think absolutely graphic novels can be really powerful.
The pictures and it helps them understand a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, because there's serious history. That's the thing. You know what I mean? It's
facts.
We're not glossing over big things here. I'm sure there's simplification here and there, but we're not like dumbing down the story. All of these things that happen presented in a really kind of approachable way,
right? And
it can be a hard subject to get into. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And so I think something like this, like reading March and then reading Run, I think will encourage readers to want to go and pick up, maybe more scholarly or deeper kind of, looks at this time. So I think, only good can come from that. I don't know. Any final thoughts, final takeaways from reading these?
I think it's a lot of really good information. Like I said, it's a really serious subject, but these books really bring a lot of color, a lot of visuals.
Yeah.
They really open up your imagination, and the story is a lot easier to understand when you kind of get in that visual stimulation.
For sure.
It's not an overload of information because it's a graphic novel, so it's, just little bits and pieces at a time.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to digest.
Yeah. I'm wondering, how do you think if you would have had something like this when you were in high school, like reading something like this, do you think that would have changed your perspective or your approach?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I'm trying to think how it would have impacted me differently.
And that's why I even brung up that whole, thing about, reading it to your children, because I remember being maybe in second or third grade and the teacher reading Charlotte's Web. It was no picture. It was maybe like 2 pictures in that book.
Yeah.
But we were so engulfed in the story, right?
Yeah.
So I'm imagining if you're using these books doing that same story time with all the pictures and, with the subject matter, that would have really opened my eyes up to, just what was going on in the country, because a lot of this stuff we kind of just learn as we growing up, and, maybe we might face some of these things in our personal life. So I think it definitely would have been very... it would have put me right in front of what was to come.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, again, thinking about my own experience in high school and even younger. And there was, racism was pretty prevalent in that area. I heard a lot of racist things, and it was kind of a big part. And me sort of figuring out for myself, like, why that was, and, just what is going on, and why people are thinking this way, what these thoughts are. Is something that, like, I think more like as an adult looking back on it, I'm able to kind of like parse and be like, man, that's awful. That's terrible. Like, why? And so I feel like having something like this that I would have read and related to, as a young teenager, I don't know. I think it would have been really helpful for me to kind of put together things I'm seeing and hearing and kind of understand, the history of it and where it's coming from. So I'm glad it's here now.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Definitely a great read for young people and for older people too.
For sure.
It definitely.
I mean, you're older than me, so I'll take your word. I'll take your word on it.
It's very broad. So
Yeah, for sure. Well, again, the books are March Volume 1, 2, and 3. Fun fact, March Volume 3 is the only graphic novel ever to win a National Book Award.
I did hear that.
Ever.
I did hear that.
So that's pretty great.
Yeah, that really is.
But we have all 3 volumes of March. Yes. Run just came out, I want to say late in 2021, I believe.
Yeah, this was because right after his death in 2020. Yep. So, yeah. But
we've got them all here in the collection, so if you haven't read them before, perfect time to come in. I think we still have some giveaways of March Volume 1 too, so
yeah, we do.
Stop in and ask about that. But anyway, the books March and Run, and they're available right here at the David A. Howe Public Library. We currently have our Lincoln collection up, so that's on display in the exhibition room. Book clubs continuing here at the library. As we mentioned, the subscription services are up, so if you want to get in on that, you can just let us know at the front desk or send us an email at wellsville@stls.org. Anything else coming up you're looking forward to, book or movie-wise, Malik?
Well, Poetry Month will be coming up in April.
That's right.
That's my little thing. So
yes.
I love poetry. I've been, doing some writing, and I'm pretty excited about that. So,
yeah. You can hear Malik's original poetry right here in the feed. Pop back to last year. We've got it there.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to pick some poetry to read together in April.
Yes, I would love that.
Okay.
Definitely looking forward to it.
All right. Well, Malik, always good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me, always.
All right. We'll see you next time, everybody.